Before there was breath, before there was language, before the first creature ever looked toward the sky, there was stone. The story of our world began not with life, but with the slow cooling of chaos. The newborn planet spun beneath a young sun, wrapped in storms of fire and oceans of vapor. Lightning crawled across skies filled with ash. Volcanoes poured rivers of molten rock into seas of acid. The surface boiled, cracked and shifted, building the first foundations of what would one day be called continents. Time, in those early ages, was measured not in days or years, but in epochs of unimaginable length. 2 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion years, spans so vast that the human mind can only whisper them. Yet even then, deep beneath those ancient skies, the planet was already writing its memory into stone. Each mineral grain, each crystallized layer of rock, was a line in a story that began long before we existed. As the young Earth settled, the crust thickened and hardened, creating continents that drifted across a sea of molten mantle. One of those ancient lands was the heart of a vast supercontinent that geologists would one day call Gondwana. Here, beneath the surface of what is now southern Africa, chemical reactions between water and minerals began to lay down sediments rich in calcium and magnesium. Layer upon layer, these sediments slowly transformed into dolomite, a hard, pale rock that still carries the imprint of the planet's earliest life. In those layers lie the fossilized remains of microscopic colonies, cyanobacteria, organisms that captured sunlight and exhaled oxygen into a world that had never known it. These tiny architects of air changed the atmosphere forever. They filled the oceans with oxygen, turning greenish iron seas into clear blue waters. They made possible every future creature that would breathe, and within the dolomite that would one day cradle the Sudwala caves, their presence remains locked, an unbroken connection to the dawn of life. Imagine a world without trees or flowers, without animals or wings, a world where continents were bare stone and microbial mats clung to shorelines like living paint. The sky would have been tinted orange from methane, and the sun dimmed through haze. Yet even in this strange and silent landscape, the seeds of complexity were forming. Minerals dissolved, water seeped, crystals grew, and over millions upon millions of years, the planet sculpted its first masterpieces: caverns, mountains, and valleys that waited patiently in the dark. It is humbling to remember that stone is older than life, and in its silence it remembers everything. Every eruption, every flood, every extinction and rebirth has left its fingerprint in rock. The planet's memory is not written in ink or stored in machines, but locked in crystals, folded into strata, carried in the slow pulse of tectonic motion. To read that record is to hear the voice of the Earth itself, not in words, but in pressure and heat and the steady rhythm of time. When we walk into a cave that formed hundreds of millions of years ago, we are stepping into the past made solid. The air there carries the breath of ancient oceans. The walls are the pages of a story that began before the first animal stirred. Even now, as water drips through ceilings of stone, the writing continues. Each drop carves a single letter, each mineral layer a sentence added to a chronicle that will outlast every civilization we know. We humans tend to believe that history begins with us, that meaning starts where memory can be told, but the rocks remind us otherwise. They remind us that we are temporary guests on a planet that has already lived through unimaginable cycles of creation and decay. Mountains rise and vanish, oceans bloom and dry away, continents drift, collide, and split again. Through it all, stone endures. This is the perspective of deep time, a scale so vast that even the rise and fall of species become moments in a greater heartbeat. The Earth has been patient for over 4.5 billion years, and in that patience, it has crafted wonders that we are only beginning to understand. One of those wonders lies hidden in the ancient dolomite of South Africa, a place where the rock itself predates humanity by billions of years. There, beneath the hills of Mpumalanga, an opening leads into darkness. Inside, water still moves, air still breathes, and minerals still grow. This is not a relic of the past, frozen in silence, but a living system, a memory still writing itself in stone. Long before our kind appeared, before even the first dinosaur set foot on land, this place began to form. It has watched continents shift, climates change, and species vanish, yet it continues, slowly and silently, unchanged in its devotion to time. To enter that cave is to cross a threshold between worlds, from the brief flicker of human time into the immeasurable expanse of geological time. Here, every drop of water, every shimmer of mineral crystal speaks of patience beyond comprehension. It is a place where history and eternity meet, where the boundary between life and stone blurs. And so, our story begins, not with humanity, but with the earth itself, not with invention or progress, but with the quiet persistence of rock. The Sudwala Caves are more than a wonder of nature. They are a living link to the beginning of everything we know. They remind us that before all else there was stone. Time is not a straight line. It folds and drifts, it stretches and collapses like light through the fabric of the universe. If we could watch the story of Earth in a single breath, it would unfold like a slow heartbeat that began long before memory. Galaxies formed from the faint shimmer of hydrogen, swirling into clusters of stars that burned for billions of years. Within one quiet arm of a spiral galaxy, a cloud of gas gathered and began to collapse. From that collapse, a small world took shape, molten and restless beneath the glow of a young sun. The early Earth was a violent world. Oceans boiled and vanished again and again as meteors rained down. The air was thick with carbon dioxide and methane, the skies red with dust. Yet from that chaos, something remarkable began. Water settled into basins, the first continents formed. Crust cooled into plates that drifted slowly across the mantle. Over unimaginable spans of time, rock layers built upon rock layers, creating archives of heat and pressure that recorded every ancient transformation. It was during these incomprehensible ages, nearly 2,800,000,000 years ago, that the land we now call Southern Africa began to form its bones. Beneath an ancient sea, minerals and sediments slowly accumulated, settling into what geologists would name the Malmani subgroup of the Transvaal supergroup. This would one day become dolomite, the grey stone that now cradles the Sudwala Caves. In those ancient sediments lived tiny colonies of cyanobacteria that formed round structures called stromatolites. They were small, fragile and patient, but their work was immense. By capturing sunlight and releasing oxygen, they transformed the chemistry of the world. Every breath we take today owes its existence to those silent builders that lived billions of years before the first fish or fern appeared. For hundreds of millions of years, nothing moved on land. Only the whisper of wind across barren rock, only the rhythm of tides washing over shallow shores. Yet inside the crust, deep chemical currents were at work. Dolomite compacted and hardened under immense weight. Water flowed through fractures, dissolving minerals and widening the spaces between grains. Each molecule of carbon dioxide, each drop of slightly acidic water, played a role in shaping the landscape that was still hidden beneath the surface. Time pressed forward, slow but unstoppable, carving potential into stone. Then, about 240 million years ago, something changed. Pressure, water, and chemistry aligned to begin sculpting the first voids that would become the Sudwala Caves. This was long before mammals walked the earth, long before flowers existed, long before the continents drifted into their modern shape. Dinosaurs had not yet drawn their first breath. What we now call South Africa lay within the southern heart of Gondwana, and vast rivers of groundwater were seeping through dolomite, dissolving it grain by grain. Cavities formed, widened, and merged into chambers. The rock above them hardened like the crust of a cooling bubble. Imagine that darkness, not the quiet of night, but the true absence of light. Within that blackness, droplets of mineral-rich water traced paths through the ceiling, leaving behind tiny rings of calcite as they fell. Over millions of years, those drops grew stalactites, reaching downward like the slow fingers of time. From the floor, stalagmites rose to meet them. Where they touched, pillars formed, each the result of thousands of centuries of patience. Even today, these structures continue to grow, a fraction of a millimeter at a time. To stand before such a formation is to confront an age the human mind can barely hold. We measure time in days, years, and generations. The cave measures time in chemical reactions. One drop, one crystal, one layer. It is a reminder that the Earth's clock runs on scales we cannot perceive. While humans count their history in thousands of years, the cave counts its life in tens of millions. The world outside changed again and again. Mountains rose and wore down. Forests came and went. Creatures emerged, flourished, and vanished. Still, beneath the surface, the cave endured. It was a constant through extinction and renewal, its chambers expanding as water continued its endless work. Even when the first mammals appeared, small and uncertain beneath the shadow of reptilian giants, the Sudwala system was already ancient. When the age of dinosaurs ended and mammals began their climb toward dominance, the cave had already existed for more than 100 million years. When our earliest primate ancestors began to swing through forests, the cave stalactites had already thickened into towers. When hominins walked the savannas of Africa and began shaping tools from stone, the Sudwala chambers had long been echoing with the slow drip of water. Every era has left its faint signature upon the cave. Shifts in temperature, rainfall, and chemistry altered the rate of mineral deposition. Traces of isotopes inside the speleothems tell the story of ancient climates. Within those rings of calcite lies a record more complete than any written chronicle, a memory of the Earth's breath itself. Scientists can read these patterns to understand how rainfall changed hundreds of thousands of years ago, how the planet cooled and warmed, how the pulse of life above ground echoed in the silence below. In this way, the Sudwala caves are not only ancient, they are alive. The processes that began hundreds of millions of years ago continue even now. The air within them holds its own climate, cooler, denser, and more stable than the world above. Water continues to flow through invisible fractures, bringing dissolved minerals that feed the slow growth of new formations. The cave is an organism made of stone, breathing in geological rhythm. To step inside is to move backward through time, to feel the weight of billions, of years pressing inward from the walls. It is not a museum of fossils or a relic trapped in stillness. It is a living system, older than humanity, older than the continents as we know them. It has witnessed the rise and fall of ecosystems and will likely outlast every trace of human civilization. In its patience, it teaches us scale. In its silence, it teaches us humility. And in its endurance, it whispers the first truth of this story, that the world we inhabit was already ancient before we arrived, and it will remain long after we are gone. The air inside the Sudwala caves feels different, even before the eyes adjust to the dimness. It carries a density that cannot be found above ground, a steady coolness that has remained unchanged since before the first mammal took form. When one steps past the threshold, the outside world falls away. The sounds of wind and bird and leaf vanish. What remains is the deep pulse of dripping water and the faint echo of one's own breath. It is as if the planet itself is inhaling through the corridors of stone. Long ago, when these chambers first began to open, the continents were not where we know them today. The landmass that would become Africa sat closer to the southern pole, bound within the great body of Gondwana. Ice sheets advanced and retreated, leaving minerals in their wake. Vast forests of strange plants covered the continents closer to the equator, and amphibians were beginning their first steps onto land. Through all of this, water seeped through fractures in the dolomite, dissolving pathways that would widen into halls and tunnels over time. The mechanism that carves such caverns is simple yet inexorable. Rainwater absorbs carbon dioxide from the air and from soil, becoming slightly acidic. As it percolates downward, it reacts with the dolomite, which is made of calcium and magnesium carbonate. The reaction dissolves microscopic amounts of rock, And as countless drops travel the same path, the result is the creation of voids. Over millions upon millions of years, those voids grow large enough to swallow rivers. The process is called karstification, and it is among the slowest and most patient of all geological forces. Inside Sudwala, this invisible chemistry sculpted cathedrals. The ceilings curve like the ribs of a sleeping giant, and from them hang thousands of stalactites, each one a record of endless dripping. On the floors rise stalagmites, tapering upward with equal devotion to gravity. In some places, they meet to form pillars so thick that they seem to hold up the mountain above. One of the largest is known as Samson's Pillar, a column of mineral that began forming more than 200 million years ago. Even today, it continues to grow by a fraction of a millimeter each century. The sight of such formations is deceptive. To human eyes, they appear still, motionless, complete. But in truth, every surface is in motion, every crystal expanding molecule by molecule as new minerals are, laid down by water. The cave does not rest. It only moves on a scale that lies beyond perception. If time could be accelerated, the chamber would appear to breathe, its walls flowing like wax beneath an unseen hand. When light from a torch catches the formations, they shimmer with faint color, gold where iron has mixed into the calcite, green where traces of copper lie, silver where quartz has grown clear. These are the pigments of time, born from the chemistry of ancient groundwater. To walk through these chambers is to step inside the memory of water. Every drop that once passed through here has left a trace, and together those traces have built a monument that is both solid and fluid, ancient and alive. The atmosphere within such a space plays tricks on the mind. Distances become difficult to judge. Footsteps seem to come from every direction at once. Shadows appear to move even when nothing shifts. The human brain, shaped by sunlight and horizon, finds itself without reference. It is easy to feel small here, to feel as though the world above is no longer real. Perhaps that is why humans have always felt awe in caves. They are reminders of our insignificance, mirrors that reflect not our form but our fragility. Scientists who study these caverns often speak of them as natural laboratories. Within the stone lie clues about the Earth's history, its climate, its chemistry. Speleothems, the collective name for stalactites, stalagmites and flowstones, contain isotopic signatures that record the composition of ancient rainwater. By studying them, researchers can reconstruct patterns of drought and flood reaching back hundreds of thousands of years. In some cases, the data stretch further still, reaching into times when no species of human yet existed. The Sudwala Caves are one such archive, a geological library whose pages are written in mineral layers. Yet this laboratory is also a living ecosystem. Though sunlight never reaches its depths, the cave supports life. Bats cling to the ceilings, their guano feeding small insects and fungi that thrive in the darkness. Microbes coat the wet surfaces, forming biofilms that draw energy from the slow oxidation of minerals. These organisms are not remnants of ancient life, but active participants in a modern subterranean web. Their existence proves that even in the deepest quiet, life endures. To imagine this place at the moment of its creation is to picture an alien world. The sky above would have been heavy with storms. Great reptiles dominated the swamps and coasts, their roars echoing through jungles of fern and horsetail. In those same ages, far below their feet, water moved unseen through dolomite, expanding cracks into chambers, chambers into labyrinths. While life above evolved, competed and perished, the cave below remained indifferent, continuing its patient work. When the continents began to drift apart and Gondwana broke into fragments, mountains rose around the region that now forms Mpumalanga. Rivers carved valleys, exposing layers of ancient rock. The dolomite that had formed under an ancient sea was lifted high into the air. Yet, even then, the cave endured. Its corridors adjusted to new pressures, its streams found new routes, its formations adapted to the shifting weight of the world above. The Sudwala Caves became a survivor of continents. To stand within them today is to touch something that has outlasted every empire and every extinction. The ceiling above has witnessed the birth of mountains and the disappearance of oceans. It has heard the silence after meteor impacts and the soft return of rain. It is older than mammals, older than flowers, older even than the idea of time as humans understand it. And still, it continues to change. The cave's patience is absolute. It teaches that endurance is not stillness, but motion too slow to see. That truth humbles the visitor who listens long enough to hear it. The dripping water becomes a metronome of eternity. Each echo carries the same rhythm that has filled this darkness for hundreds of millions of years. It is the sound of the earth remembering itself, a voice that asks no questions and offers no answers, only continuity. To emerge again into daylight after such depths is to feel the weight of ages lift. The sun seems younger, the air thinner, the world louder, yet beneath the feet, hidden under layers of rock, that same heartbeat continues. The Sudwala caves remain alive, still carving, still growing, still bearing witness. And as the light fades behind the traveller leaving its entrance, the last sound to follow is the patient whisper of dripping water, a reminder that time has no urgency and the earth no haste. The return to darkness always feels inevitable. It draws the curious mind downward, back toward the silence that holds the oldest truths. To enter the cave once more after daylight is to surrender the rhythm of human time and let the slower pulse of the earth take over. The air cools again, the sound of the surface fades, and the scent of minerals replaces the smell of leaves and wind. Every sense sharpens to compensate for the absence of light. Here, sight is limited, but perception deepens. One begins to hear the texture of stone and to feel the weight of millions of years pressing inward from all directions. If one could watch the formation of these caves in accelerated time, it would look like a dream of liquid rock. Water would shimmer through fractures, glinting briefly before vanishing into the dark. Cavities would open like slow explosions, swelling outward over eons. Stalactites would grow downward like translucent vines. From the floors, their counterparts would rise to meet them, fusing together in elegant spirals. Entire chambers would appear and collapse, and new ones would form in their place. The cave would breathe, expand, and change shape, a geological organism living beneath the crust of the world. This process never stopped. Even now, as tourists walk with lanterns and guides, the cave continues to shape itself. The drops that fall from the ceiling are still busy with invisible labor. Each one carries a faint load of dissolved calcium and magnesium, and as the drop reaches the floor, it releases a fraction of that cargo, building the next layer of stone. It is a process so slow that even after a human lifetime, the growth might only be a single grain thick. But when measured over millions of years, those grains become pillars, curtains, and entire walls of mineral lace. Some formations gleam with subtle colors that tell of the chemistry of ancient water. Reddish hues mean iron, greenish tones mean traces of copper, while milky white flows mark pure calcite laid down by clean groundwater. Scientists who study these details can trace the story of rainfall, drought, and temperature changes that occurred long before written history. The cave, though voiceless, speaks clearly to those who know its language. It records the breath of the planet, the way tree rings record the rhythm of seasons. Each mineral layer is a timestamp from an age when continents moved differently, when creatures of other worlds walked the surface above. The Sudwala caves are part of a much larger system that runs through the dolomite of the region. Hidden tunnels and channels extend far beyond what has been mapped. Some are too narrow or flooded for human exploration, yet instruments detect their presence by the way sound echoes and water behaves. These uncharted spaces are reminders that even after centuries of study, the Earth still keeps most of its secrets close. The known chambers may only be a small fraction of the whole. Geologists believe that fault lines played a key role in guiding the shape of the cave. Where the rock was already weak, water could flow more freely, enlarging the fractures and creating interconnected corridors. Over time, streams carried sediments deeper into the mountain, leaving behind terraces and pools. In some places, small calcite dams have formed along these underground rivers, creating rimstone basins that shimmer faintly when touched by light. Each of these structures represents an equilibrium between movement and stillness, water flowing just enough to deposit, but not enough to destroy. The temperature inside remains constant through the seasons, around 20 degrees Celsius. This stability has persisted for as long as the cave has been sealed from the sun. The air is heavy with carbon dioxide exhaled by the stone itself, and humidity hovers near saturation. It is a world of perfect balance, immune to weather, indifferent to storm or drought. Even the sound here feels timeless. The human ear begins to perceive patterns in the dripping water, rhythms that seem almost musical. Scientists sometimes describe it as white noise, but for those who listen long enough, it becomes a kind of language, not speech, but resonance. When early explorers and scientists first entered these depths, they carried torches that cast flickering shadows on the walls. The moving light made the stone seem alive. Faces and forms appeared and vanished in the dark, shaped by imagination and geology alike. Today, with steady electric lamps, the illusion is gone, but the feeling remains. The cave still seems to breathe. It feels aware, as if time itself lingers here, condensed and tangible. To study a place like Sudwala is to confront the truth of scale. Humanity has existed for a heartbeat compared to the ages inscribed in these rocks. Even the entire history of civilization, from the first carved symbol to the latest digital signal, is barely a flicker against the span of this dolomite's life. When one realizes that these walls were already ancient, when the first dinosaur looked up at the stars, the concept of history changes. It becomes not a straight line, but a spiral, a motion that loops endlessly, with each revolution only a faint echo of what came before. The story of the Sudwala Caves is not just a tale of geology, but of patience, persistence, and the quiet creativity of natural forces. It shows that even the slowest processes can create grandeur beyond imagination. A single drop of water, repeated endlessly, can hollow a mountain. A single chemical reaction, sustained for millions of years, can sculpt a cathedral of stone. The lesson is one of humility, that creation does not always require fire or violence. Sometimes it requires only time and stillness. When the visitor finally leaves and steps once more into daylight, the brightness feels almost intrusive. The surface world, with its motion and noise, seems fragile after the silence below, yet the cave remains beneath the feet, continuing its slow transformations, unconcerned with the passing of human years. The wind will erode mountains, rivers will shift their paths, civilizations will rise and vanish, and still the Sudwala Caves will endure, whispering their story drop by drop. The world above believes it moves forward, but the earth beneath teaches that all motion is circular and all stories return to stone. The Sudwala Caves are not relics of a vanished time. They are the living heart of the planet's memory, pulsing still in the dark. The creation of a cave begins with weakness. In the language of geology, it starts where the rock yields, where fractures form, where the perfect solidity of the earth is ever so slightly undone. The Sudwala Caves were born in such a place of imperfection, within layers of dolomite that had lain buried for more than 2 billion years. Water found those weaknesses and began its quiet work. It did not rush or strike, it seeped, dissolved, and waited. Every drop of rain that touched the ancient landscape began as vapor high in the sky. As it fell, it gathered carbon dioxide from the air, forming a delicate solution of carbonic acid. When that water reached the ground, it seeped through soil and rock, absorbing more gas from the breath of microbes and the decay of plants. By the time it reached the dolomite below, it was strong enough, molecule by molecule, to alter the stone. Dolomite is not easily conquered. It resists change, a dense and crystalline blend of calcium and magnesium carbonate. Yet even the hardest minerals cannot stand forever against patience. The acid water reacted with the rock, converting solid crystal into ions that were carried away in the underground streams. Over ages beyond counting, those small dissolutions became channels, and the channels became caverns. To imagine this from within is to picture the mountain as something porous and alive. Beneath its weight, invisible rivers crawled through its veins, carving and connecting, creating hollows that echoed faintly when struck by seismic tremors. There were no witnesses. No creature had yet evolved eyes to see the growing labyrinth. And still the work continued, an endless conversation between rock and water. Karst landscapes, the name geologists give to such regions, are the result of this relentless erosion. Their surface features, sinkholes, disappearing streams, underground lakes, are but hints of the vast systems below. In the region surrounding Sudwala, these karst processes shaped a hidden topography even as the land above shifted and eroded. Faults guided the flow of water. Mineral composition determined the rate of dissolution. Slowly, with the patience of planetary time, the first halls of the cave were formed. Inside, chemical equilibrium was everything. As groundwater flowed, the balance between dissolution and deposition changed. Where water became saturated with calcium and magnesium, minerals began to crystallize again, forming flowstones that shimmer like frozen waterfalls. Each formation represents a moment of stillness, a pause in the endless exchange between rock and liquid. Over millions of years, the chambers of Sudwala expanded and stabilized. Some collapsed, leaving jagged domes that later smoothed under the weight of new mineral deposits. Others filled with water, creating underground lakes that mirrored the ceilings above. The Great Central Hall, now known to visitors as the amphitheater, may once have been a single flood chamber that drained as the water table fell. The shapes that remain, the curves, the arches, the towering pillars, are not accidents. They are the geometry of time itself, drawn by gravity, chemistry, and persistence. If we could compress that time into the length of a single day, the formation of the cave would look like an unfolding flower. The first petals would open in darkness, delicate and invisible. The slow drip of water would trace veins through the rock, expanding outward until a network of tunnels emerged. For brief geological moments, streams would rush through them, clearing debris, reshaping passages. Then silence would return. The process would repeat in cycles of erosion and rebirth, as if the earth were sculpting by breathing. At the heart of these transformations lies carbon, the same element that builds life, fuels fire, and carries memory in the chemical structure of stone. When carbon dioxide dissolves in water and reacts with dolomite, it forms bicarbonate ions that drift away, freeing space where matter once existed. In this sense, every void in the cave is the ghost of carbon. The air we breathe today carries atoms that once rested within these rocks. The exchange between earth and atmosphere, between solid and fluid, is unending. Eventually, as the surface climate shifted and new rivers cut through the valleys above, the balance tilted. Less water reached the depths and parts of the cave began to dry. In those dry chambers, new formations began to grow. Stalactites hanging like icicles, stalagmites rising from the floor, each born from the same chemical process reversed. Water-carrying dissolved minerals entered the air of the cavern, releasing carbon dioxide and leaving behind a crystal deposit of calcite. The cycle had turned from destruction to creation. These speleothems are the visible signatures of the cave's ongoing life. Some are thin and fragile like translucent ribbons. Others are massive pillars that could support cathedrals. Their growth is unimaginably slow, perhaps 1/10 of a millimeter each year, yet that slowness is their strength. In the patience of their accumulation lies the endurance of the planet. Among these formations stands Samson's Pillar, a column more than 200 million years in the making. It rises from floor to ceiling, an unbroken connection between earth and sky within the cave. Scientists have dated its lower layers to times when the supercontinent Pangaea still existed, when vast deserts stretched across the interior of the world and reptiles ruled the land. Since then, the pillar has grown imperceptibly upward, one droplet at a time, through mass extinctions, ice ages, and the birth of mammals. The beauty of such a structure is not merely in its size, but in what it represents, the constancy of process amid the impermanence of all else. Outside, mountains crumble, rivers change course, and species vanish. Inside, the cave continues without pause. It is as though the earth, in the Sudwala depths, keeps a quiet sanctuary where nothing ever truly ends, only transforms. To walk through those chambers is to witness the mathematics of erosion. Every curve and fold follows patterns born of natural laws: fluid dynamics, mineral saturation, gravitational flow. Yet the result feels organic, as if shaped by intent. Nature's artistry needs no designer beyond time itself. The elegance of the cave lies in that paradox, pure physics producing beauty that feels deliberate. Even now, when human voices echo within its halls, the cave pays no mind. It will persist after those voices fade, just as it did before they arrived. Its language is older than words, its patience older than thought. The water still drips, the crystals still grow, and the stone still dreams in silence. The cavern's story is not finished. Its architecture continues to evolve, guided by the same gentle forces that began its creation. In every sense, the Sudwala caves are alive, breathing through water, aging through chemistry, remembering through stone. The cave's creation was not a single event, but a sequence of transformations that stretched across hundreds of millions of years. To understand it is to think in scales far beyond a human lifetime. Imagine time not as a line, but as a vast ocean, where each moment is a wave rising and falling into the next. The Sudwala caves were born from such tides of geological change, each layer of rock recording a different rhythm in the Earth's slow breathing. Deep beneath the land, where pressure and silence reign, the chemistry of stone became a living script. Water continued to dissolve and redeposit minerals, carving passageways that connected chamber to chamber. Some of these tunnels collapsed and sealed themselves again, others branched outward, forming veins of darkness that stretch into the unseen depths of the dolomite. The cave became a network of hollow arteries within the body of the mountain. There is a strange perfection in how water behaves underground. It is not random. It follows rules written by gravity, temperature, and the geometry of fractures. When two streams meet, they merge and deepen the channel between them. When one path becomes blocked, pressure builds until a new route opens. Over millions of years, these movements create patterns that echo the branching of roots, rivers, and even lungs. The cave is nature repeating its favorite design, a fractal of persistence. The rock around the Sudwala caves is ancient enough to have known many worlds. When the dolomite first formed, oxygen was still new to the atmosphere. When the caverns began to open, the earth was covered by conifer forests and roamed by early reptiles. Later, when mammals appeared and the continents rearranged, the cave was already complete in its main form, sealed from sunlight, waiting in quiet permanence. Through each transformation above, the underground system endured. Geologists who study such caves often think of them as time capsules. By dating the minerals that line the walls, they can trace the changing chemistry of rainwater across millions of years. Tiny variations in isotopes of oxygen and carbon reveal past climates, warmer, wetter, or colder than today. In this way, the cave's walls are not merely stone, they are memory made tangible. Every stalactite and stalagmite carries a coded message from the planet's earlier moods. At certain points within the Sudwala system, thin layers of sediment mark ancient floods. These were moments when the water table rose and turned dry passages into subterranean rivers. Sand and clay settled there, sealing organic fragments and crystals inside. Later, as the waters receded, those sediments hardened, preserving a brief moment in the cave's endless evolution. For geologists, such deposits are precious. They reveal how surface conditions changed, how rain increased, or drought tightened its grip. The idea of an active cave is often misunderstood. Many imagine that once a cavern forms, it becomes still, like a fossil. But Sudwala is not a relic. It is alive with motion too subtle to see. Air flows through it, drawn by differences in temperature between entrances. Water trickles from unseen reservoirs, rich with dissolved minerals. Even bacteria inhabit its surfaces, feeding on the trace nutrients carried by the water. To call the cave active is to recognize that its processes continue, slow, invisible, but unbroken. In some chambers, delicate soda straws hang from the ceiling, hollow stalactites no thicker than a reed, formed when mineral-rich water drips too gently to close their narrow channels. Each straw grows straight and true, adding a single ring of calcite for every drop that passes through it. If disturbed, they shatter with the slightest touch. Yet untouched, they endure for tens of thousands of years, as fragile and eternal as glass spun by gravity. Elsewhere, massive flowstones cover walls like sheets of melted marble, rippled with colour. These are the result of mineral-laden water spreading across rock faces, depositing thin films of calcite as it flows. The patterns look like waterfalls frozen in mid-motion, capturing the moment when liquid became solid. Some are smooth and gleaming, others etched by air currents that leave behind intricate waves. Each one is a portrait of movement slowed almost to stillness. As the cave matured, the chemistry of its water changed. Variations in acidity, driven by the balance of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere above, altered the rate at which rock dissolved or minerals precipitated. In this way, the cave is linked to the surface world in ways unseen. When forests thrived, more carbon dioxide was absorbed into the soil, accelerating the dissolution of dolomite. When the land dried and vegetation vanished, the process slowed. Even in darkness, the cave breathes with the pulse of climate and life. There are places within Sudwala where time feels suspended entirely. Pools of water lie motionless, so still that their surfaces appear solid. The air there is perfectly quiet, temperature unchanged from season to season. These pockets are the still hearts of the cave, regions where no breeze or vibration reaches. And yet, beneath that stillness, chemical exchanges continue. Minerals dissolve and reform in microscopic cycles, a hidden dance that never stops. If one listens carefully, the sound of dripping water becomes a rhythm. It is not random, it is measured by the slow heartbeat of the planet. Each drop that falls is part of a continuum that began long before life on land, and will continue long after our species has faded. To stand in that darkness is to feel the immensity of time pressed into a single sound, the echo of creation still at work. Even after all these millions of years, the cave's work is not done. New passages may still be forming deeper within, where groundwater continues to carve through untouched dolomite. Perhaps in another 100 million years, these chambers will connect to unseen systems, or collapse to form new valleys above. The Earth will decide, as it always has, guided only by gravity, chemistry, and the quiet persistence of water. In the end, the Sudwala caves are not merely spaces within rock. They are living equations written by time, proof that even in the slowest processes lies infinite power. Each curve and crystal, each echo and shimmer tells the same story, that creation never truly stops. It only changes its pace. Water and stone continued their endless conversation, the dialogue between solid and liquid shaping the invisible architecture beneath the surface. For every chamber that collapsed, another opened elsewhere, guided by gravity and time. The Sudwala caves are not a monument to permanence but to transformation. Each curve and passage a reminder that endurance is born from constant change. As centuries flowed into millennia, the world above the cave evolved. Volcanic plains cooled into fertile soil. Forests advanced and retreated with each shift in climate. Creatures rose, dominated, and vanished. Yet the cave beneath remained untouched by these surface dramas. In its darkness, the only motion came from the fall of water and the slow crystallization of minerals. It was a world apart, sealed from sunlight, yet connected to every living thing through the water that carried the planet's breath underground. There is a serenity within the Sudwala caves that defies human measure. The air moves, but slowly, drawn through the smallest of openings, balancing pressure between the outer world and the inner void. Every droplet that falls carries information, a record of the surface above, its chemistry altered by soil, roots, and microbes. When that droplet lands on a stalagmite, it transfers a message, a coded signature of temperature and rainfall, acidity and time. The rock listens, records, and grows. Scientists have learned to read those messages by examining the isotopic ratios within the calcite. The oxygen and carbon locked in its crystalline lattice They can reconstruct past climates. They can see when the world was warmer or colder, when droughts lasted centuries, when monsoons returned. In this way, the cave becomes an instrument of memory. It does not merely preserve its own formation, but also the shifting heartbeat of the planet. The story of its birth is not limited to chemistry and erosion. It is entwined with the entire evolution of Earth's atmosphere and life. As the ages turned, the shape of the cave stabilized. Its great halls settled into equilibrium, their ceilings arched by eons of adjustment. In the darkness, where no light has ever touched, crystals formed with perfect geometry. Some grew as needle-thin clusters, others as massive translucent blocks. These are minerals that took their time, forming over spans longer than the entire history of civilization. To disturb them is to break a timeline that took millions of years to write. The Sudwala caves, though ancient, are not fossils. They remain active, alive with imperceptible movement. Streams still flow through hidden channels, carving unseen depths. New stalactites begin where old ones ended. The chemical balance of the cave continues to shift with every season's rainfall, every variation in the carbon dioxide of the air above. In this way, the cave mirrors the living earth, both constant and changing, both patient and dynamic. To stand in such a place is to confront the meaning of time itself. A human life is less than a flicker compared to the age of these stones. Civilizations appear and disappear within the blink of a geological eye. Even species are temporary when measured against the continuity of mineral and water. The cave reminds us that permanence is an illusion, and yet it also offers comfort. For while all living things fade, the processes that gave rise to them endure. The same forces that shape these caverns still shape mountains, rivers, and even our own bones. In the quiet of the cave, that truth becomes palpable. Each echo is not just sound, but resonance through history. Each glimmer of crystal is light refracted through time. There are moments when the distinction between self and stone dissolves, when one feels not like a visitor but a continuation, a small, temporary ripple in the same ocean of matter that carved the earth. As explorers and scientists mapped these passages, they named chambers and formations, giving human words to things that had existed long before language. Yet the cave does not need those names. It has existed comfortably without them. Its identity is written not in letters but in chemistry, the flow of carbon through water, the rearrangement of calcium and magnesium, the gentle exhalation of gas. These are its true vocabulary. The cave speaks through reaction, through the slow dance of molecules rearranging themselves into structure and void. Every stalactite, every ripple of flowstone is a physical record of equilibrium achieved. In this way, the Sudwala caves are less a place than a process. They are time given form, persistence made visible. Their stillness is deceptive, for within it lies the ceaseless movement of matter. The cave breathes the rhythm of the planet, inhale through dissolution, exhale through deposition. Above ground, the landscape will continue to change. Winds will wear down the escarpment. Rivers will shift their courses. Vegetation will reclaim the valleys, then yield again to drought. And beneath it all, the cave will remain, adapting in silence. It will persist when memory has faded, when even the mountains have turned to dust. For as long as there is water and stone, the conversation will go on. The story of the Sudwala caves is not finished, because the earth itself is not finished. The forces that shape this planet are still at work, still folding and unfolding the crust, still carving the future beneath our feet. What began 240 million years ago continues today, drop by drop. The cave does not ask for witnesses, yet it receives them generation after generation, each drawn by the same unspoken wonder, the sense that here, in the heart of the earth, time reveals its true nature. And so, the chapter closes where it began, with stone and water, partners in an endless creation. The cavern that was born in darkness continues to grow, its walls recording the heartbeat of the world. Above it, humanity builds and forgets, learns and fades. But beneath, the dialogue continues, unchanged in purpose, infinite in patience. the Sudwala caves endure, the sculpted breath of Earth itself. Long before there were forests or animals or even the whisper of wind through leaves, there was life hidden in stone. It was not the kind of life that moved or breathed as we do, but it was life nonetheless, small, stubborn, and endlessly inventive. Within the dolomite that now holds the Sudwala caves, microscopic organisms once thrived in ancient oceans nearly 2 billion years ago. Their bodies were simple, little more than membranes and pigment, yet they carried within them the chemistry that would one day create everything that walks, flies, or dreams. The fossils of those first architects still lie locked in the rock. They are called stromatolites, layered structures formed by colonies of cyanobacteria that grew in shallow water, trapping sediment in their sticky films. Each layer was a page of biological history built grain by grain over time. These organisms, by drawing energy from sunlight and releasing oxygen, transformed the atmosphere of the entire planet. Before them, the air was thick with carbon dioxide and methane, unfit for breathing. After them, the world began to change. Iron dissolved from the seas and settled to the ocean floor, creating the red bands of rock that mark the Great Oxidation Event. The sky turned blue, and the path toward complex life began. The dolomite that encases the Sudwala caves was formed during that transformation. It bears the chemical fingerprints of a world in transition, when living cells first learned to shape their environment. The limestone and dolomite of the Transvaal supergroup are, in a sense, the petrified remains of an ancient ecosystem, a snapshot of the moment when geology and biology first merged. Within those layers are the earliest conversations between rock and life, between chemistry and consciousness yet to come. When we look at the Sudwala caves today, we are seeing the descendants of those primordial processes. The cave stone is not dead, it is full of subtle activity. Even now, bacteria cling to its damp walls, feeding on trace elements in the water. They form thin films of life that shimmer faintly under light, adapting to an environment that has never known the sun. Some metabolize iron and sulfur, others draw energy directly from the slow dissolution of minerals. To them, the cave is not a void but a universe, an ecosystem complete and self-sustaining. Scientists have begun to study these microbial communities as models for survival in extreme environments. They are ancient in lineage, resembling the earliest organisms that lived on Earth. Some of them are extremophiles, capable of surviving where temperature, acidity, and darkness would destroy more complex creatures. By examining their genetic makeup and chemical pathways, researchers learn how life might persist elsewhere, beneath the icy crust of Europa, within the rocks of Mars, or under the methane skies of distant exoplanets. The Sudwala caves thus serve as a bridge between worlds, a living reminder that biology finds a way wherever chemistry allows. Every droplet of water that seeps through the cave carries not only minerals, but also microscopic travelers, spores, bacteria, fragments of DNA. These tiny passengers enter from the soil above, find refuge in the constant humidity, and begin to form communities in the cracks and pools. Over time, they alter the chemistry of the rock, accelerating or slowing the growth of formations. Some species even create their own minerals, precipitating crystals as byproducts of metabolism. In this way, life participates in the very process of speleogenesis, the ongoing shaping of the cave. The cave's air, though still and cool, is rich in unseen movement. Bats roost within the upper chambers, their wings stirring currents that circulate through the tunnels. Their presence introduces nitrogen and phosphorus into the ecosystem through guano, which in turn feeds fungi and insects adapted to the darkness. Small invertebrates live on the cave floor, feeding on the organic particles carried by air and water. In this hidden world, energy flows through intricate pathways, from microbe to fungus to insect, closing the loop between chemistry and life once again. These creatures live without sunlight, relying instead on the subtle energies that seep from rock and decay. It is a world of scarcity and precision, where every resource is recycled and nothing is wasted. Evolution here is a sculptor of efficiency. Eyes fade because there is no light to see. Pigments vanish because there is no need for colour. Antennae lengthen to sense the faintest vibration. The result is an ecosystem stripped to its essence, proof that life adapts not only to abundance but to near total absence. The Sudwala caves thus stand as both geological and biological archives. Their walls remember the first breath of oxygen, and their chambers sustain the descendants of that breath. The organisms that live here do not break from the past, they continue it. In the same way that stalactites grow one ring at a time, the history of life extends through unbroken lineage, from those ancient bacterial mats to the creatures that flutter and crawl within the cavern today. It is humbling to consider that the cave has never been truly lifeless. From the moment the dolomite formed in ancient seas, through its burial and metamorphosis, through the slow carving of its hollows, some form of life has always been present. The types have changed, but the principle has not. Life persists, it waits, it adapts, it endures. And beyond biology, the cave's story intersects once more with humanity's. For the same darkness that shelters microbes and bats once offered refuge to early humans. Long after the cave had formed, when our ancestors began to walk upright and shape tools from stone, they too found in such places safety and mystery. The connection between humans and caves is not coincidence. It is instinct, an echo from the time when survival meant sheltering within the Earth's body. Nearby, in the same region, other caves of the ancient dolomite have yielded fossils of early hominins, ancestors who lived and died more than 2 million years ago. The famous cradle of humankind lies not far from Sudwala, its limestone chambers preserving the bones of Australopithecus and early Homo species. Though Sudwala itself has not revealed such remains, it belongs to the same geological family, born from the same stone and shaped by the same waters. It was part of the landscape our ancestors knew, part of the terrain that shaped their minds. When one walks through the Sudwala caves today, surrounded by echoes and dripping water, it is easy to imagine the earliest humans entering such spaces with torches of flame, watching the light flicker across walls that had already stood for hundreds of millions of years. They would have felt the same cool air, heard the same steady drip, and sensed the same awe. Perhaps they saw the cave as a womb of the earth, a place of birth and rebirth. Perhaps they saw it as a passage between worlds, between life and death, surface and underworld, human and divine. Whatever their thoughts, the connection was real. Caves like Sudwala shaped the human imagination long before language gave us words for wonder. The first artists who painted animals on stone walls in Europe, the first shamans who echoed chants through the dark, were continuing a dialogue that began when microbes first etched their patterns into the seafloor. The link between life and rock has never been broken. It merely changed form, from chemistry to consciousness. In the Sudwala caves, that continuity is still visible. Bacteria glisten on wet stone as they did billions of years ago. Bats rest in the arches above, their ancestors tracing back to the age of dinosaurs, and humans walk among them bearing lights of their own, electric now instead of flame, but serving the same purpose, to bring a little illumination into the deep. The lesson the cave offers is simple yet profound. Life does not conquer its environment by force. It adapts, collaborates, and endures. Whether it is a microbe in stone, a bat in darkness, or a human seeking meaning, the pattern is the same. The will to exist moves quietly, patiently, shaping the world drop by drop, cell by cell, thought by thought. Here, beneath the hills of Mpumalanga, that story continues. The cave still breathes. The air is alive with invisible motion, the stone with invisible chemistry, the darkness with invisible life. Everything that ever was still lingers here, waiting to be noticed. And as always, the deeper one looks, the more one realizes that the boundary between living and non-living is thinner than we imagine. In the deep stillness of the cave, the idea of life expands beyond what we usually understand. Without sunlight or seasons, without day or night, survival follows rules written long before the first leaf ever reached for the sky. Energy comes not from the sun, but from the earth itself, drawn through mineral reactions that release tiny sparks of chemical power. For the creatures here, those faint energies are enough. Water, stone and carbon form the foundation of every ecosystem, and in the Sudwala caves they compose a delicate balance. Microbes feed on minerals dissolved by slow trickles of groundwater. They take what seems lifeless and transform it into sustenance. Some of them use iron and sulfur instead of oxygen, breathing in a way that would kill most other organisms. Others fix nitrogen from the air trapped in the chambers, building the first links of an invisible food chain. Though unseen, their work is constant. Every drop that falls carries not only minerals but colonies of living cells, each repeating the same chemical dance their ancestors performed in ancient seas. When light from a researcher's lamp passes over the damp walls, faint traces of colour emerge. Greens, oranges, purples. They are not the colours of moss or lichen, for no plant can survive here. They are pigments produced by bacteria to protect themselves from minerals that would otherwise poison them. To the eye, they appear as stains or films, but under the microscope they are cities, billions of cells connected by filaments, exchanging nutrients and signals. In their patterns, scientists see the same cooperative logic that governs coral reefs or forests, only reduced to its most essential form. The air itself carries signs of life. Each breath inside the cave is heavier than the air above, enriched with carbon dioxide produced by microbial respiration and the slow exhalation of the stone. Sensors reveal subtle fluctuations, a rhythm of oxygen rising and falling with the tide of bats and insects. During the day, when the bats sleep and the cave rests, the air grows still. At night, as wings stir and guano falls to the floor, carbon dioxide levels rise again. Even in darkness, the ecosystem keeps time. On the ground, guano forms a thin layer of nutrients in an otherwise barren world. It is food for fungi, which in turn nourish beetles and tiny crustaceans that scuttle through the debris. These small creatures break down the waste into simpler compounds, returning them to the water that flows onward through cracks and pools. Nothing here is lost. The cycle is perfect in its efficiency, repeating the ancient rule that in closed systems life must recycle or die. Occasionally the drip of water collects into small pools, each one a microcosm. Within them, microbial mats form, soft and gelatinous, their surfaces shifting slowly as gases rise. These pools are laboratories of evolution, changing in composition as minerals and organisms interact. Some contain species found nowhere else on Earth, adapted so precisely to the chemistry of this cave that they cannot live beyond it. To study them is to glimpse the resilience of life, its ability to evolve wherever a tiny foothold exists. The Sudwala caves are not unique in hosting such ecosystems, but their age gives them special significance. The dolomite that surrounds them was laid down when life itself was young, and the organisms that live within it today carry echoes of that distant time. Genetic studies show that many cave-dwelling microbes belong to ancient lineages, unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. In a sense, they are living fossils, maintaining the same metabolic strategies that sustained life when the continents were bare and the oceans green with algae. For scientists searching for life beyond Earth, such discoveries are profound. If organisms can survive here, in darkness, without sunlight, with limited nutrients, then perhaps they can survive beneath the surface of Mars, or beneath the ice crusts of Europa and Enceladus. The chemistry is similar: rock, water and energy from within. The Sudwala caves become a model for planetary habitability, an earthly window into possible alien ecologies. But beyond the science lies something older and more instinctive. In this place, the line between the living and the non-living fades. The same forces that build stalactites also sustain bacteria. The same water that dissolves rock carries the molecules of life. The cave is not divided between geology and biology. It is both at once, a seamless system where matter flows through cycles of form. To the Earth, there is no distinction between animate and inanimate, only transformation. When early humans first encountered caves like these, they may have sensed this truth intuitively. To them, the living rock must have seemed divine, breathing, moist, echoing. They saw faces in the walls, heard spirits in the drips and whispers of air. It is easy to imagine a prehistoric mind feeling that the cave itself was alive, that it possessed awareness older than any creature. In a way, they were right. The awareness they sensed was the continuity of matter, the persistence of pattern. Standing in the Sudwala caves today, surrounded by the same humidity and sound, one can feel that continuity. Every breath taken there connects to billions of years of respiration, from cyanobacteria to bat to human. The oxygen in our lungs was first exhaled by ancient microbes whose fossils are still embedded in the surrounding dolomite. The carbon in our bodies was once part of minerals now dripping from the ceiling. The boundary between ourselves and the cave dissolves, revealing that life and earth are not separate stories, but the same story told in different languages. The most remarkable truth of all is that the cave continues to change even as we stand within it. Each footprint compresses dust that took centuries to settle. Each exhalation adds moisture that may become a mineral layer someday. We are participants, not merely observers. The living system includes us, however briefly. Our visit becomes another ripple in the cave's long narrative, a note added to the ancient symphony of water and stone and life. And as we leave, the darkness closes again, unchanged, yet slightly altered, just as it has done for millions of years. The bacteria continue their quiet work. The bats return to roost. The drip echoes through the chambers, patient and precise. Life continues in its smallest forms and in its greatest cycles, proving that even in the deepest silence, the world is never still. The connection between life and stone is older than imagination itself. Long before the first forest swayed in wind, before any creature dared to walk the land, the dialogue between mineral and organism had already begun. The Sudwala caves are one of the few places on Earth where that conversation continues, almost unchanged, echoing through both time and chemistry. Here, life and geology are inseparable, each shaping and feeding the other, each writing the story of the planet in its own script. If one could condense the entire history of life into a single day, the birth of humans would occur only in the last few seconds before midnight. For most of that long day, life belonged to the small and unseen. Bacteria, algae, single-celled organisms quietly remaking the planet. The rocks beneath our feet are filled with their legacy. The dolomite that shelters the Sudwala caves holds within it the fossils of those earliest worlds. To touch its walls is to rest a hand on the first traces of biology that the Earth ever recorded. That history never truly ended. Even today, microbes shape the cave as surely as water and pressure do. Some species of bacteria consume the minerals of the dolomite and excrete compounds that trigger new formations of calcite. Others coat the stone with protective layers that slow erosion. The stalactites that glisten under the faint light are not merely the product of chemistry, they are living collaborations. Without the invisible work of microorganisms, their shapes and colors would be different. The cave is not a monument built by nature alone. It is a partnership, a long collaboration between life and matter. In the quiet pools scattered through the chambers, one can see this union continuing. The surfaces are covered with delicate films, iridescent and thin as thought. They shimmer because of microscopic layers of bacterial growth, refracting the light of lamps just enough to reveal their presence. Beneath those films, minerals precipitate into new crystals. What appears to the eye as stillness is, in truth, construction in progress. The builders simply work too slowly to be seen. Every molecule of water that passes through the cave has touched both the sky and the stone. It has risen as vapor, fallen as rain, seeped through soil rich with roots and decay, then descended through fractures in the dolomite. Along the way, it has gathered gases, salts, and organic matter, the chemical stories of everything it has encountered. When it reaches the cave, it becomes both sculptor and messenger, carrying the signature of the surface world into the darkness. The bacteria that live here depend on that message, reading it in the form of nutrients and trace metals. The balance between the living and the lifeless is so perfect that neither could exist here without the other. Some scientists believe that such underground ecosystems maybe among the oldest continuously active biological systems on the planet. Shielded from sunlight and protected from extinction events on the surface, they have persisted through cataclysm and ice age, through meteor impact and continental drift. When species vanished above ground, these hidden communities endured, safe within the Earth's body. To study them is to glimpse a line of survival, stretching unbroken across billions of years. And yet, despite this resilience, the cave is delicate. The smallest change in temperature, humidity, or air composition can alter its balance. A single misplaced light can disrupt bacterial colonies that have existed for centuries. A single human touch can transfer oils that block the breath of the stone. This fragility makes the Sudwala Caves a paradox, ancient beyond measure, yet vulnerable to the briefest human presence. Conservation is not merely about preserving beauty, but about protecting the continuity of life itself. For all their endurance, the creatures that dwell here are invisible to most visitors. What people notice instead are the more familiar signs of life: the flicker of a bat's wing, the faint squeak from the ceiling, the soft rustle that breaks the silence for a moment before fading again. These small beings remind us that even in the deepest night, life finds its rhythm. The bats navigate through sound, their voices bouncing off the walls in pulses that return as echoes. The cave answers each call with precision, shaping the path of flight with geometry millions of years old. When the bats depart to hunt in the outside world, they carry the cave's breath with them, traces of air and spores, particles of dust that have slept underground for ages. In return, they bring nutrients and seeds from the surface, unknowingly maintaining the connection between two worlds. Through them, the cave remains part of the living planet above. There is something profoundly moving about the persistence of these systems. They remind us that life does not simply adapt to its surroundings, it transforms them, turns stone into shelter, darkness into refuge. The same impulse that led microbes to shape stromatolites in ancient seas now leads bacteria to carve crystals in the Sudwala Caves. The pattern has not changed, only its stage. Humans, too, are part of that pattern. Though our presence here is recent, we are drawn to caves by an instinct older than civilization. We feel at home in these places because they speak to the memory of origin. Within the first shelters carved by water and time, our ancestors learned fire, protection, and art. They painted stories on the walls of caves not merely to decorate but to acknowledge something deeper, that existence itself began in darkness. To light a flame in such a place is to reenact creation, to bring awareness into the void. The Sudwala Caves may never have been a home to those early artists, yet they belong to the same lineage of meaning. Their chambers echo with the same sense of reverence, the same quiet that invites reflection. Standing there, one senses that the cave does not simply exist below the surface. It exists beneath consciousness itself, at the boundary where matter becomes thought. Life in the cave teaches one final lesson, that endurance is not resistance but harmony. The bacteria, the bats, and even the formations of stone endure because they move with the flow of conditions rather than against it. They accept the pace of change that the earth allows. In their example lies wisdom for humanity, to survive not through dominance but through alignment with the rhythms that sustain the world. When the lights are turned off and the visitors leave, the cave resumes its natural state. The darkness folds back over everything, the temperature settles, and the drip continues. Life continues, unseen but unwavering. The same forces that shaped the cave over hundreds of millions of years still move quietly in the deep, still joining water to stone, stone to life, and life back to the endless cycle of Earth itself. The Sudwala Caves are not merely a relic or a wonder, they are proof of continuity. They are the living memory of the planet, breathing slowly, dreaming in minerals, and whispering through the smallest forms of life. They show us that existence at every scale is the art of persistence, and that even in the deepest dark, the universe never stops creating. The story of humanity is barely a flicker compared to the ages that shaped the Sudwala caves. By the time the first humans appeared, these chambers had already seen continents drift and vanish, oceans rise and fall, and entire lineages of life come and go. Yet, when our species finally emerged, we found these ancient places waiting for us. Vast hollows carved by water and time, filled with darkness that seemed both dangerous and divine. The connection between caves and human history runs deep, far deeper than the written word. Our earliest ancestors sought shelter in them long before they learned to build. Stone and darkness offered protection from the cold, from predators, and from the storm. But more than that, the cave offered something spiritual. It was a place that felt alive, the breath of air from unseen tunnels, the dripping water that seemed like a heartbeat, the echo of every movement repeating endlessly through unseen halls. To those first explorers, it must have felt like stepping into the body of the earth itself. Though there is no record that early humans lived within Sudwala, the region around it carries evidence of ancient occupation. Nearby Dolomite caves of the cradle of humankind, some 100 kilometers to the west, hold fossils of Australopithecus, an early Homo species. These beings walked upright more than 2 million years ago. They shaped tools from stone and sought shelter in caverns much like this one. The same rock that cradled them stretches beneath Sudwala. The same underground waters that carved their shelters carved this one too. We are their descendants, walking through the same geological memory. By the time Homo sapiens appeared around 300,000 years ago, the Sudwala caves were already ancient beyond comprehension. Their chambers had been forming for over 200 million years. The air inside had remained cool and steady through ages, when glaciers advanced and retreated across continents. The creatures of the Ice Age may have passed near its entrance, their footsteps echoing faintly down the slope, but the cave itself continued its patient work, indifferent to the surface world. Still, there is a strange symmetry between the cave and humanity. We too are sculptors of time, though our timescales are shorter and our tools more abrupt. The cave forms through slow dissolution and deposition. We shape our world through thought and fire. Both leave marks upon the earth, though only one endures. The Sudwala caves remind us that our mastery is temporary. The earth does not resist our presence, nor does it require it. It simply persists, as it always has. To step inside the Sudwala caves today is to encounter the measure of that persistence. The same drops of water that fall now have been falling for millions of years. The same minerals that built Samson's pillar continue to crystallize. The same air circulates through the same passages, balanced by pressure between the surface and the depths. Everything moves, but at a rhythm so slow it seems eternal. It is a humbling lesson for a species that lives by speed and change. There is a moment in every descent when the light from outside disappears completely. In that instant, the mind begins to drift. The boundaries between now and then dissolve. One feels connected not just to early humans, but to something far older, to the creatures that lived before us, to the stones themselves. The walls of the cave seem to pulse with memory. They have seen extinction and rebirth, fire and ice, silence and song. They have watched life emerge from water and return again. In that darkness, the sense of time collapses. What remains is the continuity of existence itself. When people first explored these caves in recorded history, they brought lanterns and torches, unaware that they were retracing steps taken by countless others before them. They carved paths, named formations, and marveled at the shapes of stalactites that looked like curtains, wings, or frozen waterfalls. Yet behind every act of exploration lies an echo of something older, the instinct to seek what lies beneath. We have always looked downward as much as upward, searching for meaning both in the stars and in the stone. The Sudwala caves, though not known to hold human artifacts as some others do, still carry the presence of humanity in subtler ways. The air itself changes when we enter. Carbon dioxide rises, humidity shifts, and warmth spreads into places that have not felt it for centuries. We become part of the system, altering it by our very existence. The cave absorbs us, records us, and then continues its work as though nothing happened. To the cave, we are just another passing phenomenon, a momentary flicker in its unbroken history. There is power in recognizing that. We are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as makers of history, but in places like this, history dwarfs us. The cave has witnessed the rise of our species, the birth of language, the invention of art, the spread of civilizations, and it remains unmoved. Its memory extends far beyond the reach of any myth or story we tell. It is not a symbol of death or eternity, but of constancy, the quiet endurance that underlies all change. For ancient peoples, caves were often seen as portals, thresholds between the world of the living and the unseen. The darkness invited interpretation, and the echo of sound suggested the presence of spirits. In some cultures, caves were wombs of the earth, symbols of creation. In others, they were mouths of the underworld, entrances to realms of mystery and danger. Both interpretations hold truth, for a cave is both cradle and grave, both origin and return. Perhaps that is why the experience of entering such a place still evokes awe, even in an age of science. We may understand the chemistry, the geology, the physics of sound and water, yet the emotional effect remains the same. The cave humbles the mind because it shows us what time truly means. It erases the illusion of permanence and replaces it with the truth of continuity. The difference is subtle but profound. Nothing lasts forever, but everything transforms. When we leave the cave and return to daylight, it is as though we are being reborn. The brightness feels sharper, the air warmer, the sky impossibly vast. We emerge carrying something invisible, the awareness that beneath every step we take, the earth is alive with memory. We are surrounded by stories older than the species that reads them. In that realization lies both wonder and responsibility. To walk upon the surface is to tread lightly over eons of history. The Sudwala caves remind us that our civilization, magnificent as it may seem, is built on borrowed time. Beneath us, the planet continues its slow, unending work, shaping, dissolving, renewing. Our task is not to conquer that process, but to understand it, to find our place within the rhythm of the earth. And so, as we step out of the darkness and into the light, we carry the shadow of the cave with us, a reminder that we belong not above the earth but within it, part of the same ancient continuity that has shaped every stone, every drop of water, and every living thing. The relationship between humanity and the cave is as ancient as the species itself. Before there were cities or temples, before there were even words to name the world, there were caves, sanctuaries carved by water and time, waiting for someone to enter. To our distant ancestors, the cave was not simply a shelter, it was the first architecture of thought, the first enclosed space that allowed imagination to take shape. Inside those natural chambers, protected from wind and fire and the unending horizon, the human mind began to turn inward. The darkness of a cave changes perception. It silences the world and sharpens the senses. A single flicker of flame becomes a sun. A single sound becomes a heartbeat. Early humans who entered such places carried with them fire, but they also carried wonder. They saw in the shifting light the shapes of animals and spirits, the patterns of creation itself, the first art, the first ritual, the first sense of the infinite. All of these may have begun within the embrace of stone. The caves of France and Spain bear paintings tens of thousands of years old, yet their emotional origin could just as easily have arisen here, in the Dolomite heart of Africa, where humanity itself was born. In southern Africa, ancient peoples used caves not only as refuge, but as connection points to the spiritual world. Archaeological studies show that nearby rock shelters were sites of ritual and vision. The sound of dripping water and the echo of human voice were not mere acoustics. They were messages from the unseen. For them, caves were thresholds, neither earth nor sky, neither life nor death, but something in between. To enter was to cross into another reality, one shaped by patience and mystery. It is likely that people once stood near the mouth of Sudwala, watching mist rise from its depths and wondering what lived beyond the reach of light. Perhaps they threw torches or stones into the darkness, and listen to the echo return, measuring distance not in meters but in heartbeats. They may have given it names now lost and stories now forgotten, describing the cave as the dwelling of gods, ancestors, or spirits. The instinct to name, to imagine, to make meaning from what cannot be seen, that is the essence of humanity. The cave did not merely shelter that instinct, it inspired it. The people of this region, long before recorded history, learned to read the landscape as a living presence. Every mountain had a voice, every river a soul. The cave was the mouth of the earth itself, a place where the planet breathed. To enter was an act of respect and courage. It required acknowledging forces larger than oneself, forces that could destroy or protect, depending on how they were approached. Such understanding was not superstition but harmony, a recognition that survival depended on cooperation with the world, not conquest of it. As time passed and civilizations grew, the role of caves changed, but the fascination remained. In many cultures, they became symbols of wisdom and rebirth. The philosopher's metaphor of the cave, imagined by ancient thinkers, was a reflection of humanity's journey from darkness into understanding. Yet even that symbolic cave was rooted in something real, the memory of stone walls and echoing silence. When people began to build temples and cathedrals, they imitated the shapes of caverns, arching ceilings like stalactites, cool shadows that recalled the deep. Architecture remembered its birthplace. The Sudwala caves, in their immense age, remind us that every human story unfolds against a background far older than the species itself. When we light our torches within its halls, we are repeating an act billions of years in the making, the meeting of heat and stone, energy and matter, life and the inorganic. Our presence adds a brief shimmer to that continuum, but the cave will continue long after we are gone. Scientists studying the region often speak of the caves as records, archives of geology and climate, yet they are also archives of emotion, repositories of awe. Every human who has entered has felt the same mixture of fear and wonder, the same pull toward the unknown. It is as though the cave speaks directly to something buried in our genetic memory, something older than civilization. Perhaps that is because we evolved within the rhythms of the earth. Our earliest shelters were not built by hand but found in nature, and so part of us still recognizes the feeling of belonging when stone surrounds us. Even today, when modern visitors step into Sudwala with electric lamps and cameras, their reactions are not so different from those of their ancestors. The silence overwhelms speech. The vastness compresses thought. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling seems impossibly ancient, like the ticking of a clock too large to comprehend. The air, cool and dense, carries a scent that cannot be described. The smell of minerals, of age, of continuity. For a moment, even the most rational mind feels reverence. The scientific becomes sacred. There are no paintings on these walls, no carvings or relics to tell us how humans once used this place. But perhaps that absence is its own kind of message. Not every sacred site requires human marks. Some are meant to remain untouched, to remind us that the world existed before our need to name it. The Sudwala caves speak through their stillness, and to listen is to participate in something that predates all language. What the cave offers is perspective, a recalibration of scale. It teaches that we are small but not insignificant. Like the microbes that cling to its stone, we are part of the same cycle, driven by the same chemistry, subject to the same laws of change. The difference lies only in awareness. The cave endures without knowing. We endure because we know. That knowledge, fragile as it is, connects us to the same forces that carved these chambers. If one lingers long enough in the deepest hall, where the air no longer stirs and sound fades into stillness, a realization begins to form. The cave does not remember us as individuals. It remembers us as a single phenomenon, a brief, bright episode in the story of its long existence. And yet, in that anonymity lies comfort. To be part of something vast and unending is to be freed from the illusion of separation. We belong to this planet not as masters, but as moments. Above ground, civilizations rise and crumble. Empires draw borders that will one day vanish. Technologies bloom and decay, but beneath it all, the cave continues its slow breathing. Its water drips, its minerals crystallize, its microbes persist. It is the counterpoint to human urgency, the reminder that life does not need to rush to endure. Perhaps that is why we return to such places, generation after generation, not merely to see beauty, but to feel the scale of time that shaped it, to remember that the same patience that built these caverns also built us. When one emerges from the Sudwala caves, blinking into the sunlight, there is a subtle shift inside, a quiet humility that lingers. The stone does not speak, yet it teaches. It tells us that time is not an enemy but a teacher, that change is not destruction but transformation, and that the story of humanity, brief as it may be, is written in the same language as the rocks beneath our feet. To call a cave active is to acknowledge that it is not finished. The Sudwala caves, though ancient beyond imagination, are still in motion, not in the way of earthquakes or collapsing cliffs, but in the quiet persistence of chemistry. Every drop of water that descends through the dolomite carries with it the potential to sculpt, dissolve, and create. The cave breathes through these droplets, expanding and reshaping itself on timescales too vast for human perception. To enter it is to step into a process still unfolding, a slow and deliberate symphony of transformation. Deep beneath the mountain, the air and water are inseparable. Rainfall above begins the sequence, seeping through layers of soil and stone, gathering carbon dioxide from decaying roots and organic matter. By the time it reaches the dolomite, it has become a mild acid, capable of dissolving rock grain by grain. The process is invisible, yet constant. In every corner of the Sudwala caves, one can see the signature of that chemistry. The gleam of new calcite on a flowstone, the thin film of moisture on a stalactite, the faint ripple on the surface of a subterranean pool. These are the signs of an active system, the marks of a world that never sleeps. The balance that sustains this motion is delicate. When the water loses its carbon dioxide to the air of the cave, its chemistry shifts. What once dissolved rock now begins to deposit it, leaving behind a tiny ring of calcite wherever a drop falls. Over centuries, those rings build into stalagmites, while above them stalactites descend, one crystal at a time. When the two meet, they form pillars that bridge the floor and ceiling, joining what water once separated. The beauty of such formations lies not in their stillness, but in their movement through time. Each one is a timeline written in stone, its layers recording the rhythm of water, temperature, and air that governed its growth. Scientists have learned to read those layers as one might read the rings of a tree. Inside each deposit lies information about the climate outside, the composition of the atmosphere, the temperature of rainfall, even the vegetation that once covered the surface. When studied carefully, stalagmites become archives of the world above, preserving a record of droughts and floods, cold ages and warm. The Sudwala caves thus function not only as a geological wonder, but as a biological and climatic archive, a recorder of deep time. The idea that the cave is still alive challenges the human sense of time. We think of activity in moments, days, or years, but in the realm of geology, activity means persistence over millions of years. The cave does not change in our lifetime because our lifetime is too short. Yet instruments tell another story. Sensitive sensors placed along the drip lines reveal measurable accumulation of calcite each decade. The movement is microscopic, but it is there, unbroken, unstoppable. In this way, the Sudwala caves remind us that stillness is an illusion. Even in darkness, the world moves. There is a certain poetry in knowing that the water we see dripping today began its journey decades ago, when it first fell as rain on the surface above. As it travelled downward through layers of soil and stone, it absorbed elements and isotopes that now mark its age and origin. When it finally emerges into the cavern, it carries the memory of the world it came from. Each drop is a messenger, connecting the present with the distant past. In this way, the cave serves as the meeting ground of time, where the ancient and the immediate coexist within the same echo. In some chambers, delicate crystals known as helictites twist and spiral from the ceiling in directions that defy gravity. Their strange growth patterns are caused by tiny fluctuations in airflow and moisture, forces so subtle that they can change the path of a single droplet. These formations are among the clearest signs of an active cave, for they respond to conditions minute by minute. If the air were ever to grow still or the water to cease, they would stop growing at once. Their presence proves that the cave is not inert. It is breathing, reacting, alive. The interior climate of the Sudwala caves remains remarkably constant. Temperatures hover around a steady 20 degrees Celsius, while humidity approaches saturation. Such stability makes it an ideal environment for the slow choreography of mineral deposition. Yet even here, subtle changes occur. Scientists monitoring the cave have observed fluctuations in air composition that correspond to rainfall, vegetation growth, and even human visitation. The balance between carbon dioxide from the air and that from the dissolving water determines how quickly new crystals form. The cave, like a living organism, adjusts to these inputs, maintaining equilibrium through feedback. Beyond its scientific significance, the concept of an active cave carries a deeper philosophical weight. It reminds us that the world is never truly static. Mountains rise and crumble, rivers shift their paths, oceans open and close. What we call stability is merely motion too slow to see. The Sudwala caves make that truth tangible. Their walls appear eternal, yet they are flowing, in a sense, stone turning to liquid and back again, matter cycling endlessly through transformation. To stand within them is to witness the continuity of creation. In recent decades, researchers have begun to use caves like Sudwala as tools for studying the history of climate. Speleothem dating, based on the decay of uranium into thorium, allows scientists to trace the formation of each layer with remarkable precision. Through isotopic analysis, they can reconstruct rainfall patterns stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. The stalagmites thus become chronicles of the planet's breathing, recording how monsoons waxed and waned, how ice ages came and went. In this way, the cave is both a natural wonder and an instrument of science, a living laboratory recording the story of Earth's climate one drop at a time. But the word active means more than geology. It also describes the interaction between the cave and life itself. The same processes that dissolve rock create niches for organisms. Microbes feed on trace minerals, forming mats that shimmer faintly under light. Bats roost in the high arches, their guano enriching the soil below, which in turn supports insects and fungi. Even in darkness, energy circulates, passed from molecule to molecule, species to species. The cave's vitality is not separate from the life it harbours. It is the foundation of it. This ongoing activity also carries fragility. Changes in the surface environment, deforestation, pollution, climate shifts, can alter the chemistry of the water entering the cave. Too much carbon dioxide from the air, too little vegetation above, or rising temperatures can upset the balance that has persisted for millions of years. The very thing that makes the cave alive also makes it vulnerable. Human presence, even in admiration, must be measured with care. A single touch can halt growth on a formation for centuries, leaving a permanent scar in what took eons to build. To call the Sudwala caves active is therefore not merely a statement of fact, but a recognition of responsibility. They are reminders that creation and preservation are parts of the same process. The cave continues to grow only because conditions remain undisturbed, because the planet still provides the slow chemistry of time. In this sense, protecting such places is not about freezing them in time, but about allowing time itself to continue its work. When the lights are turned off and the visitors leave, the darkness returns to its rightful depth. The water resumes its whisper, the air finds its balance, and the cave continues, indifferent to whether it is observed. Yet for those who have seen it, the memory remains, the awareness that beneath the noise of the world lies a patient force, always moving, always creating. The Sudwala caves are proof that the earth is never still. Every stone is in motion, every moment a step in the long process of becoming. To witness that truth is to see beyond the illusion of permanence. What we call rock is simply time made visible, and what we call life is its echo. The cave is both, the planet's slow heart still beating beneath our feet. The walls of the Sudwala caves are not merely stone, they are pages in a book written by the planet itself, each layer a line in a record that stretches back billions of years. To touch them is to feel the weight of history that predates language, predates thought, and predates even the first breath of oxygen in the atmosphere. These stones remember, not in the way a human does through recollection and emotion, but through structure and chemistry. Their memory is molecular, silent, and absolute. The Earth records its past in matter. Every grain of sediment, every ripple in rock, every trapped bubble of air beneath the surface carries data. In the Sudwala caves, that data is encoded in calcium carbonate, deposited one molecule at a time by the drip of mineral-rich water. Each layer within a stalagmite holds the chemical fingerprint of the world above at the moment it formed, the temperature of the rain, the concentration of carbon dioxide, the composition of vegetation. Together, these layers form a library of climate, written not in ink but in isotope. Scientists have learned to read this library with astonishing precision. By measuring the ratios of oxygen and carbon isotopes within the calcite, they reconstruct past climates stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. When the world was warm, the balance between oxygen 18 and oxygen 16 shifted in one direction. When it cooled, the ratio reversed. Through these subtle variations, the caves tell of ice ages advancing and retreating, of deserts expanding and forests returning. They whisper of storms that lasted centuries and droughts that reshaped continents. Each stalagmite is a paragraph in the biography of the planet. To study the geological memory of Earth is to enter a dialogue with time. The processes that record these memories operate at a pace that humbles the mind. What appears static is in constant flux, though too slow for human eyes to see. In a single droplet of water lies the continuation of cycles that began before mammals existed. When that droplet falls and crystallizes, it locks within itself the state of the world at that instant. Over eons, those instants accumulate into continuity. The result is not just a record, but a consciousness of the planet, an unbroken chain of transformation that links past, present, and future. The Sudwala caves occupy a unique position in this chain. Formed within dolomite that dates to nearly 2,800,000,000 years ago, they bridge the earliest chapters of Earth's history with the ongoing story of life. The dolomite itself was born in ancient seas filled with microorganisms that altered the chemistry of the planet. The caves carved within it much later, beginning around 240 million years ago, reflect a second revolution, the rise of dynamic landscapes shaped by water and tectonics. In their depths, one can trace the entire evolution of the Earth's surface, from microbial ocean to living continent. The rock bears witness to these transitions. In its composition are the remnants of stromatolitic life that once thrived in shallow seas. In its fractures are the marks of continental shifts, the slow pulling apart and collision of plates. In its chambers are minerals deposited during wet and dry periods, each crystal an echo of ancient weather. The cave, though confined in space, contains within it the expanse of time. It is a cross-section of existence, revealing not just how the world was shaped, but how it remembers being shaped. Geologists speak of deep time, a scale so vast that human comprehension falters before it. 1,000 years is a moment, 1,000,000 a breath, 1,000,000,000 the blink of an eye in planetary terms. The Sudwala caves are monuments to that scale. They show how slow processes create enduring form. The walls around us are the condensed memory of rainfall, erosion, and mineral exchange repeated beyond counting. To walk among them is to move through time not as a line, but as a volume. Time made three-dimensional, surrounding and enclosing. Within these formations lie stories of climate and of life intertwined. Changes in isotopic composition reveal how the planet's atmosphere evolved. Shifts in trace elements show when vegetation expanded or retreated. Even microscopic inclusions of pollen and dust, trapped in calcite layers, tell of distant ecosystems long vanished. The cave is a time capsule that never closes, continuing to record as long as water flows. Each new drip writes another sentence in the chronicle of the world. Such records have practical as well as philosophical value. By studying them, scientists can understand how the planet responded to past changes in temperature and carbon dioxide. This knowledge helps predict how it may respond again in the future. The cave becomes not only a memory but a teacher. Its silence instructs us in the language of equilibrium, how systems adjust, how resilience arises from adaptation, how balance is maintained through cycles rather than constants. The geological memory of Earth is vast, but it is not eternal. The record can be erased as easily as it is written. If the water stops flowing, the formations cease to grow. If the air warms too quickly or pollution alters the chemistry of rainfall, the signals encoded in new layers will be distorted. Even the presence of human visitors introduces changes. The heat of bodies, the carbon from breath, the oils from touch. Every interaction becomes part of the record, marking the Anthropocene as a new chapter in the cave's story. The walls of Sudwala already hold evidence of our arrival, not as fossils but as subtle chemical traces. Yet despite our intrusion, the cave continues. Its patience is infinite compared to ours. It will outlast our noise, our machines, our empires. The processes that built it will resume long after we are gone, dissolving and redepositing, erasing our signatures as gently as water polishes. Stone. That continuity offers both humility and hope. Humility in recognizing our smallness, hope in knowing that the world endures. When one stands in the stillness of the great chamber, surrounded by the soft glimmer of mineral walls, a realization begins to take shape. The cave is not a remnant of the past, but a living presence of time itself. Every surface is a page still being written, every drip a continuation of the same story that began when the earth was young. It is not history preserved, but history unfolding. The rock does not age as we do, it transforms, and in its transformation lies the memory of everything that has ever been. To understand the Sudwala caves is to understand that the planet itself possesses memory, not through words or consciousness, but through form and pattern. Mountains are thoughts in stone, rivers are sentences in motion, and caves are archives of the unseen. They remind us that time does not pass. It accumulates. The present is simply the most recent layer of an unbroken whole. When we leave the cave and step into daylight, we carry a fragment of that awareness. The ground beneath our feet is not solid, but alive with the echoes of ancient seas and vanished skies. The wind we breathe contains atoms that once swirled through volcanic clouds billions of years ago. Everything that exists is part of the same record, the same unfolding continuity. The Sudwala caves are one of the Earth's oldest memories still being written. They hold within their depths the record of the planet's birth, its evolution, its persistence, and in their silent endurance they remind us that we too are part of that record, brief lines in an unending story written in dust, water, and time. To enter the Sudwala caves is to step beyond the measure of ordinary experience. The air grows heavy and cool, the light softens into echoes, and the mind begins to loosen its grip on time. Every footstep seems to carry not through space but through history. Here, in the quiet dark, one feels what generations of people have felt before, that the earth is not just ground beneath our feet, but a living presence, a being that breathes and remembers. Humans have always been drawn to such places. From the earliest times we have sought the embrace of stone, not only for protection from the elements, but for reasons far older and deeper. The cave is the original cathedral, the first space where thought turned upward and inward at once. It is where light meets shadow, where the physical world merges with imagination. The walls that surrounded the first fires also surrounded the first dreams. Long before the invention of religion or philosophy, the cave was both. Across the world, from the painted chambers of Lascaux to the ritual sites of southern Africa, caves have served as bridges between worlds. They are thresholds where people have come to speak with the unseen, ancestors, spirits, gods, or simply the unknown forces that shape existence. The sound of water dripping in darkness can evoke awe more profound than any ceremony. In such places, the universe feels close enough to touch, and time seems to breathe around you. The Sudwala caves share this timeless quality. Though they may never have held the handprints or paintings that mark other sites, they still carry the same atmosphere of reverence. To stand within the amphitheatre chamber, where the ceiling soars high above and the air vibrates faintly with sound, is to feel that one has entered a temple built not by hands, but by time. The formations rise like columns, the shadows move like the slow pulse of life itself. The heart responds instinctively. Awe is the natural reaction to scales beyond comprehension. For the people native to this region, the caves have long been part of cultural memory. Stories tell of the Swazi and their ancestors using the caverns as refuge, shelter, and meeting place. The rocks became landmarks of identity, places where generations left unspoken marks simply by being present. Though the details of those ancient uses have faded, the sense of connection remains. It is not written in words, but in the enduring relationship between people and the land, a relationship that predates any modern idea of heritage. Today, visitors arrive with cameras, guided by electric light, but the experience they find is much the same. The mind grows quiet in the presence of deep time. Modern instruments can measure humidity, air composition, and mineral growth, but they cannot measure wonder. Science explains the formation of stalactites and the chemistry of dolomite, yet explanation does not diminish mystery. If anything, understanding deepens reverence. To know that each drop of water has carried minerals for decades before reaching the chamber is to see patience made visible. In that patience lies meaning. The cave is not sacred because of myth. It is sacred because it reveals the continuity of existence. It shows that creation is ongoing, that the forces shaping the world are still at work. The same slow chemistry that formed these chambers also formed the bones of our ancestors, the shells of ancient sea creatures, and the limestone cliffs that cradle fossils of long-extinct species. The cave is a mirror of the planet's process, constant transformation through time. There is a lesson in this continuity, one that reaches beyond geology. In the human world, we measure life by its brevity, by what begins and ends. But the cave teaches that nothing truly ends, it only changes form. Water becomes rock, rock becomes dust, dust becomes air, and through it all, energy persists. To see the cave as alive is not metaphorical, it is accurate. It grows, breathes, and evolves, just as we do. The difference lies only in the tempo. Where we live in seconds, the cave lives in centuries. Its patience is a kind of wisdom. For those who enter it, that wisdom lingers. There is a humility that comes from realizing that our entire civilization would fit into a single brief layer of calcite, a paper-thin record in the Earth's archive. Yet humility need not mean despair. To know our smallness is also to know our place, part of something vast and enduring. The cave reminds us that being temporary does not mean being meaningless. We are participants in a story that began before us and will continue long after. The play of light on mineral walls evokes thoughts older than language. Shadows move with the rhythm of the water, and every echo seems to carry memory. Even the air feels different, enriched not only by the chemistry of stone but by the weight of silence accumulated over millions of years. That silence is not emptiness, it is fullness, the sound of continuity. It speaks of a world that existed perfectly well without us, yet welcomes us when we listen. The modern world moves at a pace the cave cannot follow, but within its depths time returns to its true scale. The constant dripping of water is a reminder that progress need not be hurried to be powerful. Each drop, each mineral grain, adds to a structure of great beauty and complexity, yet none rushes its purpose. In this slow rhythm lies an antidote to the noise of modern life. The cave shows that endurance and creation are not opposites but companions. When people leave the cave, they often speak softly, as if in the presence of something holy. They emerge into sunlight changed, not in a way that can be easily explained, but in the way one feels after touching something infinite. The transition from darkness to light becomes symbolic, even involuntarily. It is as if one has walked through the mind of the planet and returned carrying a piece of its patience. To encounter ancient stone is to encounter the truth of our own origins. We are not apart from the earth, but expressions of it, shaped from the same elements, subject to the same laws. The cave is a reminder that awareness itself arose from matter, that consciousness is another form of geological process, electrical rather than chemical, fast rather than slow, but born from the same material. In this sense, standing in the Sudwala caves is a meeting between the thinking part of the earth and its unthinking memory. The awe that arises here is not superstition but recognition. We see ourselves reflected in the persistence of the cave, fragile yet enduring, fleeting yet connected to eternity. We feel, perhaps for a moment, that time is not an enemy but a companion, that death is not an ending but a continuation in another form. The stone teaches this wordlessly, simply by being. When night falls and the last visitors leave, the cave returns to silence. The air cools, the drip resumes, and darkness closes once again around the slow heart of the earth. The formations continue to grow, unbothered by our wonder, unbroken by our departure. Yet the impression remains with those who have entered, the understanding that to stand within the Sudwala caves is to touch something older than humanity, something that connects all living things through time and transformation. And that perhaps is the deepest meaning of awe, not fear, not even admiration, but the recognition of belonging. In the presence of ancient stone, we remember what we have always known, that we are temporary, but we are part of something eternal. The Sudwala caves have endured for more than 200 million years, surviving the slow violence of geology, the grinding of continents, and the rise and fall of entire ecosystems. Yet their greatest test may be the age of humanity, an epoch measured not in millions of years but in centuries, a blink in geological time, yet one that leaves a mark deeper than any before. What nature shapes through patience, humankind can alter in an instant. The danger begins with admiration. Every year, thousands of visitors walk through the Sudwala caves, drawn by curiosity and wonder. The light of their lamps reveals the glimmer of calcite, the intricate formations shaped by water's endless touch. But every breath released into the air adds carbon dioxide to an environment balanced on chemical precision. The warmth of bodies shifts humidity, and fingertips press to stone deposit oils that halt growth for centuries. In this way, reverence becomes interference, gentle, unintentional, yet irrevocable. The most fragile beauty of a cave lies in its invisibility. It thrives in stillness, in equilibrium between stone, air, and water. Disturb that balance and time stumbles. The calcite that once grew with microscopic steadiness becomes dulled, discolored, or inert. A single fingerprint can seal a stalactite's surface, stopping mineral flow that began before mammals walked the earth. Even sound, the vibration of human voices, can disrupt colonies of bacteria and delicate crystals near the waterline. Preservation requires not absence of life, but restraint, a discipline of quiet respect for a world older than our own. Climate change adds another layer of risk, one far beyond the control of individual care. The rainfall that feeds the Sudwala caves originates in clouds shaped by global weather. As temperatures rise, precipitation patterns shift, altering the chemistry of the water entering the cave. Acid balance changes, mineral deposition slows or accelerates, and the equilibrium of the subterranean ecosystem begins to falter. The slow drip that once built pillars of stone may in time cease, or flow too swiftly to sustain the fragile balance of growth. Above ground, deforestation and industrial activity compound the threat. When forests vanish, rainwater no longer filters through organic soil rich in carbon dioxide. Instead, it races over bare earth, eroding the land and flooding the cave system. Pollutants seep into groundwater, carrying trace metals and chemicals that stain and corrode formations. The Earth's memory, written in mineral layers, becomes blurred, its signals distorted by our interference. In trying to read the story of the planet, we risk rewriting it by our own hand. Scientists and conservationists are fighting this quiet erosion with precision and technology. In the Sudwala Caves, as in other significant systems around the world, sensors measure carbon dioxide, humidity, and temperature day and night. LIDAR scanners map every crevice, building digital twins of chambers that might one day change beyond recognition. Each stalagmite is catalogued, its growth rate tracked with lasers and isotopic analysis. The goal is not to halt time, but to understand it, to ensure that the cave can continue its slow work without our noise drowning it out. Education plays a vital role in this effort. Visitors who descend into the darkness guided by light must also carry knowledge. The cave is not an amusement, not a museum, but a living system. The footprints we leave behind become part of its chemistry. The small acts of preservation, walking only where paths allow, avoiding touch, respecting silence, are the difference between continuation and loss. Awareness becomes conservation, and reverence becomes responsibility. Even with such care, the challenge is immense. A single natural disaster, an earthquake or flood, could alter passages that have remained unchanged for millennia. But the greatest danger is slow and invisible. Rising carbon levels, warming air, the thinning patience of the planet itself. Caves depend on stability, on the rhythm of water and temperature that has persisted since before human history. Our species has disrupted that rhythm on a global scale. The consequence is not only the loss of beauty, but the loss of record. If caves cease to grow, we lose the archives that teach us how Earth responds to change. In a sense, every effort to protect the Sudwala Caves is an act of humility. It is an acknowledgement that we are temporary stewards of something beyond our making. The dolomite beneath our feet has outlasted oceans, continents, and entire biological ages. It will outlast us as well. Yet within that vast endurance lies fragility, for the processes that sustain it can be undone by ignorance. Conservation, therefore, is not preservation of stone, but preservation of time itself, the continuation of the slow pulse that defines the living earth. To walk through the cave today is to move between two timescales. The drip of water marks the geological heartbeat, steady and patient. The hum of electric lights, the murmur of human voices, mark our own brief moment. The two coexist uneasily. For the cave to survive, the second must learn from the first. We must slow our pace, align our care with the rhythm of the rock, and measure success not in years but in centuries. There are reasons for hope. Around the world, a new generation of researchers treats caves not as curiosities, but as sentient systems, intricate, responsive, alive in every measurable sense. By studying them, we learn how to monitor air composition, track pollution, and model environmental recovery. The same data that reveals damage also guides repair. In this way, the cave becomes not only a warning, but a teacher. Its endurance instructs us in how to endure. Ultimately, the task of conservation is not to save the cave, but to save the conditions that allow it to exist. The Sudwala Caves need no rescue. They need time, balance, and silence. What they ask of us is understanding, the recognition that the earth does not belong to us, but includes us. If we can act from that understanding, then perhaps in some distant future, a droplet of water will fall within the same chamber, centuries from now, continuing the story we once interrupted. When the last visitor leaves and the lights are extinguished, the darkness reclaims its throne. The air cools, and the eternal drip resumes. The cave does what it has always done, remembers, rebuilds, and waits. Outside, the world moves swiftly toward tomorrow. Inside, time continues its slow and ancient conversation, whispering through stone the one truth that matters, that survival depends not on strength, but on harmony. The Sudwala Caves are often described as a window into the past, but they are equally a lens through which we glimpse the future. What began as a hollow carved by water in ancient dolomite has become a laboratory of time, a place where scientists study not only how the Earth once behaved, but how it will behave again. In the silence of the chambers, Between the steady drip of calcite and the faint hum of air lies information that could shape our understanding of climate, life, and the destiny of our planet. Every stalagmite and stalactite is a data archive, a record of temperature, rainfall, and atmospheric chemistry, written molecule by molecule. When researchers extract thin cores from these mineral pillars, they find sequences of isotopic ratios that tell of seasons long vanished. By studying them, we learn how droughts once spread across Africa, how monsoons waxed and waned, and how ecosystems adapted to the slow breathing of the planet. The patterns of the past become models for the future. Caves like Sudwala are therefore not relics of ancient time, but instruments for predicting what is to come. Climate scientists have learned that the record locked within speleothems corresponds with glacial and interglacial cycles stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. The chemical signatures in these formations reveal how the Earth reacts when carbon levels rise, when oceans warm, or when forests retreat. This knowledge becomes a warning. The current human-driven changes in atmosphere echo fluctuations seen before, but never with such speed. The cave, through its unbroken continuity, shows us both the resilience of the planet and the limits of that resilience. In the gleam of calcite, we see our reflection, not as conquerors of nature, but as participants in its long experiment. The cave does not resist us, it absorbs us, recording our presence in trace chemicals. Future scientists may one day read our era in the layers of Sudwala as a brief anomaly, a pulse of carbon and warmth, followed by silence or renewal. Whether that renewal includes us depends on how well we learn from the Earth's oldest teachers, but the lessons of the cave extend beyond climate. Within its hidden passages, life continues in forms that challenge our imagination. Microbes thrive in the dark, feeding on minerals and gases, forming biofilms that shimmer under light like living threads of silver. These organisms survive without sunlight, drawing energy from chemical reactions in the rock itself. They are reminders that life does not depend on the surface world, that it can exist wherever conditions permit complexity to emerge. Such extremophile life forms have drawn the attention of astrobiologists, who see in caves like Sudwala analogues for the environments of other worlds. On Mars, for example, similar subterranean structures may protect microbes from radiation and cold. On the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, water and mineral interfaces could sustain ecosystems in darkness. Studying Earth's caves teaches us what signs of life to look for beyond our planet, what chemical traces or mineral structures might whisper of biology beneath alien crusts. In this way, Sudwala becomes more than a South African wonder. It becomes a model for habitability itself, a small-scale universe that mirrors the conditions under which life might endure anywhere. The slow dripping of mineral-rich water, the chemical balance of carbon and calcium, the persistence of organisms that breathe stone. These are lessons written in the language of chemistry, universal to all matter that seeks equilibrium. The cave teaches us that life is not rare, it is patient. Another emerging field that finds inspiration in caves is the study of carbon sequestration. The same processes that built Sudwala's pillars, the absorption of carbon dioxide by water and its precipitation as calcite, are now being examined as natural mechanisms for drawing carbon from the atmosphere. By understanding how this chemistry unfolds naturally, scientists hope to replicate it artificially, accelerating the formation of stable carbonates in rock. The cave, through its unhurried precision, offers a blueprint for healing the climate we have disrupted. Beyond science, the cave holds lessons for philosophy and society. In a time when humanity measures progress by speed, Sudwala demonstrates the power of slowness. Its beauty is the product of patience, of forces that never hurry yet never stop. In its persistence, we see a different model of success, one defined not by conquest or expansion, but by balance and endurance. The cave's rhythm is the rhythm of sustainability. It reminds us that survival is not achieved through control, but through harmony with the systems that sustain us. If one listens carefully, the cave speaks a language that transcends data. Its voice is the sound of dripping water, the resonance of emptiness shaped into form. It says that time is generous, that creation is a process without finality. What we call destruction is often transformation. What we call ending is continuation under a new form. These are truths the cave has practiced for hundreds of millions of years, truths we are only beginning to rediscover in our quest to understand the planet and ourselves. There is also an ethical dimension to this learning. As we extract knowledge from the cave, we must do so gently, aware that every core sample, every step, is an intrusion into a delicate system. The pursuit of understanding must be balanced with respect for what we study. The cave gives freely, but not infinitely. Its lessons lose meaning if the act of learning destroys the teacher. Conservation and science must therefore move as one, curiosity guided by humility. Looking forward, the Sudwala Caves invite us to reimagine the relationship between humanity and the planet. We are not separate observers standing above a passive world. We are expressions of the same geology, animated by the same energy. Our cities are made of minerals, our bones of calcium carbonate, our breath of the same carbon that moves through rock and water. To study the cave is to study ourselves. Its depths are not alien but ancestral. The future of science will likely depend on this perspective. The great questions, how life began, how it persists, how it adapts, cannot be answered without understanding the slow chemistry of Earth itself. Caves are laboratories of patience, showing that creation is not a single event, but an ongoing conversation between matter and energy. They remind us that life's greatest strength lies not in resistance but in adaptation, not in defiance of nature, but in participation with it. When we gaze into the darkness of Sudwala, we are not looking backward but forward. The patterns we see in mineral veins, the steady rhythm of water, the quiet endurance of stone, these are the same processes that will shape the Earth long after we are gone. They will sculpt new worlds, new forms of life, perhaps even new minds capable of wonder. Our task is to ensure that the story continues, that we pass on the memory of balance rather than the mark of haste. In the end, the cave teaches us not merely how to preserve the planet, but how to live upon it, to move slowly enough to notice, to act gently enough to endure, and to think deeply enough to belong. The lessons are simple, but they require listening. The cave speaks softly, in the language of water and silence, and it will continue to speak long after our voices fade. In the beginning, there was only rock and silence. Then came water, and with it, time. From their meeting, the Sudwala Caves were born, not as an event but as a process, a slow dialogue between matter and change that continues even now. When one stands within those ancient chambers, surrounded by walls that began forming before the first dinosaurs drew breath, the mind struggles to hold the scale of it. Every drop of water, every glint of crystal is a sentence in a story that began long before humanity and will continue long after. The cave is not frozen history. It is a living moment stretched across millions of years. Its heartbeat is the sound of dripping water, its breath the slow exchange of air through unseen fissures in the rock. Beneath its stillness lies constant motion, molecules dissolving, rearranging, crystallizing. What appears permanent is simply change too slow to see. In this realization lies the essence of geological truth. There is no true stillness anywhere in the universe, only the illusion of it created by limited perspective. To understand this is to glimpse our place in the continuum of existence. Humanity, with all its complexity and brilliance, occupies a single flicker in the life of the planet. Our civilizations rise and vanish in less time than it takes for a stalactite to grow the width of a fingernail. Yet we are here, conscious of our smallness, capable of awe. That awareness is both our burden and our gift, to know that we exist within something vast, and that the vastness continues without us. The Sudwala Caves, carved within dolomite nearly 2,800,000,000 years old, connect the earliest Earth to the modern world. When these rocks formed, the atmosphere held almost no oxygen. The seas were home only to microbial life. Those ancient organisms, cyanobacteria and their kin, released the oxygen that would one day allow animals and plants to flourish. In a profound sense, the air we breathe today is the descendant of their labor. The same chemical cycles that shape their world shape ours. The cave, born from the remains of those early seas, carries their legacy in its stone. This connection across time is not metaphorical, but literal. The carbon that forms the cave's calcite once floated as gas in the air, dissolved into rainwater, and was carried downward through soil and rock. The same process continues today, linking atmosphere, biosphere, and lithosphere in an endless loop. The cave is where these cycles meet, where time becomes visible as structure. Each drop of water that falls carries a message from the surface, the chemistry of plants, the temperature of air, the pulse of the living world. When it crystallizes into stone, it becomes memory. If the cave could think, it might not distinguish between past and future. To it, everything is motion within continuity. The slow creation of formations mirrors the slow erosion of mountains, the endless recycling of material from one state to another. The cave knows no endings, only transitions. Even collapse, when a chamber ceiling gives way, is part of the cycle. Debris becoming soil, soil feeding life, life one day returning to stone. What humans call death, the cave understands as transformation. This perspective reshapes our understanding of time itself. We are used to thinking of time as a line, beginning, middle, and end. The cave teaches that it is more like a circle, or perhaps a spiral, where every point touches another through change. The drip that falls today may one day become part of a new formation, long after its origin has dissolved. Matter never disappears, it simply rearranges. The same is true for us. Every atom in the human body once belonged to stars, oceans, and ancient rock. To live is to borrow from eternity. Standing in the dark heart of Sudwala, one can feel this truth physically. The air is cool and thick, filled with the breath of minerals. Sound travels strangely, bending around corners, fading into nothingness. In such silence, the mind begins to slow. Thought stretches, perception expands. What remains is not fear, but acceptance. The recognition that we are part of something immense and ongoing, that our brief spark of consciousness is another expression of the same energy that drips, forms, and endures here. It is tempting to call the cave eternal, but even eternity has its tides. One day, the slow forces of erosion will widen its passages, collapse its ceilings, and return its minerals to dust. Water will find new routes through the mountain, and the cave as we know it will cease to exist. Yet its essence will continue elsewhere, in new hollows carved by the same patient chemistry. Nothing truly ends, it only changes address within the universe. This is what the cave teaches, the continuity of form through transformation. The earth itself follows the same law. Continents drift, oceans rise, climates shift, yet the planet remains. Life too follows this pattern. Species appear, evolve, vanish, and give rise to others. Humanity, for all its technological might, is part of that same unfolding. Our cities and machines are temporary crusts upon the surface, destined to erode. But the ideas we shape, the awareness of connection, the capacity for wonder, may outlast even us, pass through culture and memory like minerals through water. To learn from the cave is to learn patience. It reminds us that creation takes time, and that the measure of time is not hours or years, but transformation. It shows that progress is not always movement forward, but movement inward, a deepening understanding of relationship. The cave is not separate from us. It is within us, just as we are within it. The calcium in our bones, the carbon in our breath, the water in our cells, all have cycled through rock and air for billions of years. We are walking fragments of geology, animated by sunlight. As the world faces uncertainty, climate shifts, rising seas, the weight of human ambition, the lesson of the cave becomes urgent. It tells us that survival depends on balance, that systems endure only when their cycles remain unbroken. The cave survives because it takes only what it needs, because every process feeds another. Nothing is wasted, nothing forgotten. If humanity can learn to live with the same humility, then perhaps our story will stretch further into the future than our haste suggests. When we step out of the cave into sunlight, The contrast feels sharp, almost blinding. The air outside moves faster, the sounds louder, the colours more vivid. Yet the memory of the dark remains, a quiet weight that lingers beneath thought. The cave has changed nothing around us, but it has changed how we see. The world feels older, and we feel younger within it, like children realizing the vastness of the parent that raised them. And so the story comes full circle. The cave was born before mammals, before forests, before the very continents took their current form. It grew silently while creatures evolved and vanished. It watched the first humans walk upright, invent fire, and seek shelter in other hollows like itself. It continues to breathe, to drip, to build, indifferent to empires and machines. It will likely outlast our species, just as it outlasted those before. Yet it welcomes us still, patient and open, teaching without words. This cave was born before our species, before mammals, before the forests that became coal and the creatures that became bone. It still breathes. Water still falls. Life still clings to its darkness. It reminds us that time is larger than we can feel, and in the end, this ancient cavern asks us not what we leave behind, but what we carry forward in the shadow of the stones. The Sodwala Caves are more than an ancient wonder. They are a message written in mineral and time, waiting for anyone willing to listen. And if we listen closely enough, we may hear not just the echo of water, but the quiet voice of the planet itself. Steady, patient, eternal, unfolding.